So this story begins when I rode my yellow 10-speed the whole mile and a half to school on a county road outside of Lewiston, Idaho, or possibly a little bit earlier with my brother's motorcycle helmet as my safety gear. Or this story starts when my neighbors did not want a trail through our neighborhood in Post Falls, and I did, so I got on the North Idaho Centennial Trail Committee. Or the story starts in 1994 when I lost my re-election bid for the Idaho State Legislature. And somebody said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now, but someday I want to run a nonprofit doing work I believe in. Or this story starts when the city of Spokane built a bike lane in front of my house and invited me with infrastructure to ride my bike. Now, the first day I rode, it was awesome. It was downhill, and it was great until I went to go home. And somebody had moved the hill around. They'd turned it, and it was like this. And it can get very warm in the summer in Spokane. It was over 100 degrees. And so I made it maybe a block and a half before I started to push. And I did get home under my own steam, but it took a little longer. And I swore one of these days I was going to ride up that hill and into the driveway. Now, I met with an LCI. Shout out to all the LCIs here, who was the bike buddy. So she helped me remember the bike laws that I had probably forgotten as a driver. And she told me about a little something called the Bicycle Alliance of Washington. And I always believed in joining groups doing policy work. After all, I'd been a legislator. So I joined and I started getting emails. And then I picked up a biking boyfriend named Eric. And I rode and I rode and I rode some more. And I went from sometimes to often to every day and became that person who comes into a Chamber of Commerce meeting, taking off your bike helmet, peeling off your gloves. You're putting biking into spaces where it has not been visible. And then the Bicycle Alliance sent an email and said, we're going to have this party or event or reception or something to talk about what would make biking better in Spokane. And by that time, it was fine with me that we were going to do a 15-mile round trip on an arterial to get to that event with biking boyfriend Eric. And so we went, and in talking about it, Spokane had not had Bike to Work Week events for decades, and I volunteered to coordinate those. And from that little beginning, I got appointed to the Bike Advisory Board. All you have to do is stick up your hand, I guarantee, and you can be put in charge of something. And we had a really active BAB, and so we got a complete streets ordinance, bronze bicycle-friendly community, the first bike ped coordinator on city staff. We blew out the walls by showing with Bike to Work Week that there were people who wanted this to happen. And so I became a little notorious because I would always talk to reporters. So bikes got in the paper as well. Now, I'd been in my job at that time for over 14 years, and that's kind of like riding a long straight stretch where nothing changes. Even though work was great, loved it, fine, but I kind of needed a change of view. And then the Bicycle Alliance sent out an email saying they needed a new executive director. And I thought, you know, that would be a hill, but you can always get off and push until you can ride it. And so we moved to Seattle where, let me tell you, the hills are steeper than they are in Spokane. But had a great ride, and I know some of my Cascade and Washington Bikes colleagues are back there-ish. We passed some great bills. We set new record levels of state funding with Blake Trask as our policy director, that's him with his babies there, and had a great time for 4 years. And because I'd come from Eastern Washington to Western Washington, I also brought a little different way of thinking about statewide advocacy. We then got a little curve in the road that I will get to in a minute, but first I want to tell you that another thing for me was coming to realize the privilege that I have, and that's what helped me get on a bike. That bike lane itself can be emblematic for people, and so I committed to working to make it really bicycling for all, and that is a ride I ask us all to be on together, no matter where you're starting from. The next bend in the road was our decision to merge with Cascade Bicycle Club and create the nation's largest statewide bike nonprofit. With our logos side by side, and many of you know Elizabeth Kiker, who was with the league. Her heart was in DC, but she did great work at Cascade for several years. Now, as advocates, we had been saying to the Department of Transportation, you know, you really need to elevate biking and walking within the agency. And we had strong leadership, and they heard us and said, okay, we're going to create a division of active transportation. Now, every state DOT is a little bit different, but what that means for Washington is that when you see a list that includes aviation, public transportation, rail, freight, local governments, planning, you now see active transportation on that list. So there's that. They're going to hire a new director. And And Elizabeth announces she's going to move back to DC. So this is what you call a fork in the road. And you know what Yogi Berra said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I did that, and this is March 5th, right? So this is my 5th day on the new job at DOT. So I've mostly done new employee orientation, like that's 2/3 of what I've accomplished so far. And I know where the coffee pot is. But it is going to be a great opportunity. And so if I look back, what I see is that because the city built a bike lane and I got on my bike and I volunteered, I changed my own career trajectory. I worked with others, and we changed statewide bike advocacy. We changed the Department of Transportation. I will get to make more change there. And we'll have our 10-year anniversary this July, so we made some really sweet lemonade. That's Eric. Thank you.